we're going to unit test this class. It's called validator and it has two members, mlow and mhigh, and it has a method which returns true if the parameter passed is in this range between mlow and mhigh. Let's take a quick look at the implementation. You can see it's pretty straightforward. If we had a validator to check that a certain number is in this range between 5 and 10, for example, then good practices would tell us that you need these test cases. First, a value that is inside this interval, like in the middle. Then one that is on the lower edge, and one that is exactly on the higher edge. And also one that is outside, but in the lower part, and one that is outside, but in the upper part of the interval. So these are 5 test cases which you can write. Also, you need one that is just inside the interval but in the lower part, and one that is just inside the interval but in the higher part. So these are lots of test cases which would have identical code, but the only real difference is the value. Instead of writing all these test cases and duplicating the code, let's generate them. First thing we need to do is we need to make a fixture. We'll call this fixture validator fixture. And it will extend not test, but test with param. And now we need to specify the type of the input. To be able to use this fixture, this is normally all you have to do, but you can also add some methods or some members if you want to. We'll add a validator called mValidator, and we'll construct it with the values 5 and 10. Now let's define the test body. We use the test_p macro. First parameter is the test case name, but it should actually be the fixture, and then the test name. We'll call this test in range. First thing you need to do is to get the input value. This is done by calling getParam. Then just call the method and check the result. We want to validate the inRange method and assert true that the value is inside. We have our test fixture, we have our test body. Now let's create the test suite. Call instantiate test case p. The first thing is a prefix, it doesn't matter, it's just for naming purposes. Now for the test case name you need to actually pass the validator fixture here and use one of the generators from the previous video. I'm gonna pick from these values only the ones that are inside the interval because we are checking that the inRange function returns true. So these values would be 5, 6, 7, 9, and 10. This should be everything. Let's build and run. This is testing values, not values. So we have 5 test cases, each with the values that we passed here. Notice this is the prefix. This is the test case name, also the fixture name, and the test name given here. Let's just make things a bit more clear and print the parameter. Now you can see that each test case was generated with the values given here. What would you do to test that the value given is not in a range? First solution would be to duplicate all this code and generate parameters for values that are outside the range. In our case, that would be 4 and 11. And maybe you want to test for values that are far outside the range, like 100 and minus 50, let's say, because 4 and 11 are near misses. Let's change the name of this class into validator negative fixture. The rest is the same. This test will be called test not in range. And we also need to change this to assert false. Of course, change these values as well. In range false, validator negative fixture. Now run. Now you can notice all of these tests. In range false, validator negative fixture, test not in range, and test 0, test 1, test 2. Same as here, test 0, test 1, test 2, and so on. This is a good solution, but there's an even better one. You don't have to duplicate all of this code. The solution would be not to pass only the input values, but also the expected output value. You can do that by changing the value type of the template to a tuple. A tuple is just a set of values. In our case, the first one will be an integer and the second one will be a boolean. We need to change the test body. Now the parameter, instead of being assigned to getParam, we just need to get the first element of this tuple. This is done by calling stdget with 0 on this tuple. Now let's get the expected value. This is the second value of the tuple, so this time we call stdget with 1 on the same tuple. Let's print the expected value as well. And here, instead of asserting true, just call assert eq. And here we check that the expected result is equal to the actual result. Now we need to change all these values as well. So for 5 we expect the result to be true because 5 is in the range between 5 and 10. Same for 6 and 7. Same for 9. And same for 10. Now let's add the values that we expect not to be in the range. 4 was one of them. In this case we expect the result to be false. Minus 50 was one of them. 11 and 100 were the rest of them. Let's see what happens. Of course, you don't need angular brackets here because these are not templates. And let's format this a little better. Now you can see all of these tests together. And for each one, you can see the parameter and the expected value. So we generated 9 tests in just a few lines.